I was probably the first IIT, IIM graduate to get into advertising on a full-time basis, right? So it was a kind of a weird career choice.
What is it that it really takes to make an iconic brand? I mean, you've worked with some of the largest brands. It's not just about the spend. There's so much more that goes into the brand building, right?
A great brand stands for consistency. Great brands also stand for consistent change. Today I'm independent. I can have an opinion. I can criticize FCB's advertising. I can criticize Interface advertising. I can criticize Tata. I can criticize whomever I want. Let the show begin.
So, good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. Today, we are in conversation with Ambi, a leading brand strategist and CEO coach with over 45 years of experience spanning across marketing, sales, and advertising. Ambi's built iconic brands like Santur, ICICI Bank, and ZTV, and has led FCB Ulka's transformation into a marketing communications powerhouse. He's a prolific writer, and Ambi has authored around 11 books, including Nawabs, News, and Noodles. Ambi is also a distinguished alumnus of IIT Madras and IIM Calcutta, and a much sought after speaker and professor. So, with that very brief introduction, welcome to the talk, Ambi. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Vivek, to invite me onto your show. And I'm looking forward to having our conversation. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot talking to you as well. So thank you very much. And let the show begin.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, we are here to talk about personal branding, but we can't have you on the talk and not talk about advertising. So, would love you to first really, tell us about your journey, what got you into advertising eventually, and most importantly, what made you stay there forever.
Yeah, this itself can be the subject of a podcast,
Absolutely.
right? So I did, through whatever fate of luck or whatever, I got into IIT
Mhm.
Madras, did my chemical engineering, but within 2 years I realized that I didn't really enjoy engineering. I didn't enjoy the calculus and all that kind of stuff, which in IIT you're made to go through. So somewhere around second year I decided that I should explore other options. So after finishing my IIT, and those days IIT used to be 5 years, so I finished 5 year BTech. I managed to get a decent CGPA, not in the nine, but somewhere in the mid sevens or something like that. I managed to get into IIM Calcutta, and I went to IIM Cal straight out of IIT without any work experience. And maybe that's not a good thing. I should have probably worked for a couple of years before going for an MBA. But anyway, I went, and in much to the surprise of many of my friends, I actually did quite well in IIM Cal.
Mhm.
Uh, fate was destined that I should get into advertising, and I did my summer assignment with a relatively unknown agency those days called Rediffusion,
Mhm.
started by a group of IIM graduates, Ajit Balakrishnan, IIM Calcutta, Arun Nanda, IIM Ahmedabad, and of course, there were four other luminaries with them who were part of the core team, which was running Rediffusion. I did my summer, and then I enjoyed the summer assignment a lot. And then when final placement rolled in, much to the surprise of my friends, I decided to join Rediffusion. Now, I don't know, I haven't done a proper analysis, but I was probably the first IIT, IIM graduate to get into advertising on a full-time basis, right? So it was a kind of a weird career choice, if you look at it. But I enjoyed my 2.5 years, 3 years with Rediffusion. Really had a whale of a time, handled a number of wonderful clients. I mean, the range from cutout saris to Thermax to Cadbury, Appella, to Calico and Caliber suitings and Godfrey Phillips, red and white cigarettes. I had a whole gala time, working on multiple clients. After spending 3 years, I somehow was wondering, is this it? Is this life?
Mhm.
I was liking it a lot, but wondering, is this life? And that's when I got a call from Boots Company. The marketing head there, Anil Kapoor, called me for a chat. In fact, I don't think he interviewed me. He talked the 2 hours I spent with him. He must have spoken for about an hour and 50 minutes. I spoke for 10 minutes, but at the end, the job was mine. I joined as a product manager those days. We didn't have a concept of brand manager. It was called product manager. I joined as brand product manager. And the condition he gave me was I should work on both pharma and uh, OTC brands. So I was given Colderin and I think Sweetex to work on from the OTC side. And from the ethical side of the business, I was given a brand called Brufen, which is ibuprofen brand. I said, look, I know nothing about pharmaceutical medicine. He said, now you learn. Go into the market, work with medical reps and all that. So I spent 6 years there. After that, I moved into UDI Yellow Pages. I was in sales for 2 years. And then Anil joined Ulka, which was a struggling agency. And he kind of roped me in. So two, three of us joined. And then Arun Bable joined in Delhi. I joined here. There was Sashi Sinha. There was, Nitin Bhagwat. And there was Nagesh Alai. So five of us with Anil took over the agency. And the agency was that time struggling to make profits. It was almost a loss making agency, losing clients and losing people. But we were lucky, I think. In 5 years, we managed to turn the company around, started making good profits to the extent, I think, by the late 90s, we're probably the most profitable agency in India.
Wow.
And we had a good time. It was a single agency, Ulka, that became a group. It became Ulka, Interface Communication, there was Lodestar Media, there was direct marketing, healthcare, all this came out of it. And various reports put us in the top three, top four, marketing communication groups. So that was a very enjoyable thing. And during the course, I made some I worked on several clients for a long period. I mean, Santur, I worked on with Wipro for more than 20 years. Tata Motors, again, Tata Indica, Indigo, Zest, Manza, I worked on for about 17, 18 years. Z, I worked on for 10 years. Multiple clients, one worked on for a long, long period. So it was a great, very enjoyable thing. I debuted office in 2016. And after that, I got an invitation from SPJMR, SPJ Nanderi to be an adjunct professor. So I give them 4-5 days a month. I teach two full courses there. One is consumer behavior. The other is integrated marketing communication. I enjoy the interaction I have with my students. It's a fabulous business school, ranked among the top 5 in India. And so I enjoy teaching them. I also got myself certified as a CEO coach. So at any point of time, I'm working with 3 or 4 senior executives on their development journey. And I also, work with companies on their, shall we say, branding challenges, whether it is launching a new brand or a brand which has hit a wall, do a turnaround strategy, what kind of research should be done. So I call myself a brand coach. So I don't do standalone training programs. I do more of longer engagements, could be 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. Sometimes the engagement goes on for about 1 or 2 years. So I do that. So all this goes on in parallel. And of course, I keep writing. I write a guest column in Business Standard every month. I write once in 2 months in Economic Times. Of course, I write books. And my last book, which came out 2 years ago, is this one, which is All the World's a Stage, a personal branding story. And of course, I think there's another book which should be out by around April next year. That would probably be my 12th book. And then maybe there's one more. I don't know. I mean, I enjoy writing. I enjoy the process of learning, reading, writing. So it's an enjoyable thing I do. And I help entrepreneurs. I do a bit of counseling, mentoring of some startups, entrepreneurs. I like working with them, ask them questions. In fact, just before this, there was someone who was going to invest in some company and they wanted to take my input. So I was talking to them for an hour and a half, raising some questions. So this is what I do. It's been a good fun ride. So happy to be here, Vivek.
Likewise, I mean, it's really great to kind of listen into your life journey, unpacking those 45 years of your life, really in the workspace. In fact, I was remembering you talked about the early 90s when you kind of got involved with Ulka, and in campus around mid 90s, Ulka was right up there when it came to being the top pick for the students, because I think there was a sense of pride also that it was probably the only non-affiliated advertising agency at that time. All of the other agencies had kind of had international affiliations, right? So I think that was really a measure of pride at that point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we became part of FCB in 1997.
Right.
So till 1997, we were Ulka Advertising, and then
Yeah.
97, even we became FCB, it was FCB Ulka
Correct.
Advertising, and the name is continued.
Right.
We were one of the earliest ad agencies to take MBAs regularly from B school.
Absolutely.
So Shashi used to run the program. All of us used to go for interviewing. So we used to recruit anything between 15 to 25 MBAs. At one time, we used to recruit from Ahmedabad, and I am
Right.
Bangalore, and I'm Ahmedabad. But then later, we couldn't afford them, and then we had to look at maybe the second tier B schools. But we still used to get very, very good
Yeah.
graduates, very committed. And instead of just putting them on the job, we used to hold them back, put them through something like 3 months of orientation. And one of the unique thing, we used to call it the Star One program. One of the unique thing of that program was you had to go and spend at least 2 weeks in the field, which means you were assigned to work as a salesman with the Wipro consumer care team or the Amul team or the
Yeah.
ITC team. You actually work in the market and then
Yeah.
come back and make a presentation of what you learned.
Right.
And many of our Star One kids tell us that that probably was a kind of eye-opening exercise for them in terms of how real selling happens in the market. Because sitting in ad agencies, you can say this that, but how does the consumer come and ask for a product? How does the retailer give that soap or that shampoo or that
Right.
milk dairy whitener? That is a great experience for the MBA students. So we had a very good, and our agency was known for that. It was known for that very good grounding you get. So people
Absolutely.
used to say, look, salary is not great, but go join Ulka, 2 to 3 years, you learn a lot. After that, you
Yeah.
enjoy, you continue there, or you can find a job elsewhere without a problem. We used
Right.
to lose a fair bit of people, but at least we used to get a lot of value out of them in the
Right.
first 2 3 years. And in fact, to be interesting, uh, the one of the head guys in FCB Ulka today started his career as a trainee. Kulvinder is started as a Star One trainee. The head of HR for the entire IPG Media and FCB, Savita, is again started her life uh, a Star One trainee. The head of FCB Interface,
Mm-hmm.
Ruchita, again started her life as a Star One trainee. So a lot of them have joined, and then have come up.
Yeah.
And so this program, what we call the Star One program, ran almost uninterrupted for 25 years. 20 students every year. And we also used to take copy trainees and art trainees and put them
Mm.
along with their management trainees. And
Right.
for some time, there used to be a problem saying, this management trainee is getting, 4 lakhs. You're paying me only 1.5 lakhs. Why?
Mm.
And we used to explain, look, that guy we are paying 4 lakhs because his market value is 4 lakhs.
Right.
Your market value is 1.5 lakh because that's all you'll get if you go to any place. But you
Right.
wait, in 2 to 3 years, you will catch up. And
Right.
that's what used to happen. Some of these bright creative guys in 2 3 years used to catch up with the
Right.
management trainees. So, and we had some very good guys. I mean, even in creative, a guy like Nitish Tiwari, who ended up directing the movie Dangal, started his life as a copy
Right.
trainee with us. So we had a great bunch of terrific people. Yeah. So we were lucky,
Right.
and then the agency did well.
Right.
In fact, one of my colleagues, Arvind Bable, wrote a book called The Ulka Way, where culture eats strategy for breakfast, about
Right.
how Ulka was built. What is that secret sauce? What was the culture which built that agency? It's a very nice, thin little book, but very nice, very nicely written. Yeah.
Right.
With a lot of quotes from Anil Kapoor, and all
Right.
of us have also contributed to it. And, it was a fun
Lovely.
project.
Lovely. I mean, like I was sharing with you, my sister also spent, her early years in with Ulka, and for her, those remain as the most joyous experience of her work life, right? I think trying to, be a part of Ulka in those days as it was building up. the stress on account planning, the stress on, strategy, not just, creativity. It was something that was really fascinating, right? And they really saw it. So I'm sure it must be always fun for you reminiscing your days with Ulka in that sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were one of the, we actually doubled down on planning.
Yeah,
We used to have something like 15 people working in planning, which
yeah,
was unheard of those days. And a
absolutely.
lot of youngsters used to be put on planning, like
Yeah.
your sister. I mean, people like them who join us from B school, we look at them saying this person can go into planning, this person can go into servicing, this person can go into media. And then we
Right.
used to send them into those specific areas. And some of them actually they've gone out, done their PhD, they've set up their own companies. So very
Yeah.
good, yeah. Yeah, very
Great
good.
training ground. Yeah, absolutely. So before we segue into personal branding, would love you to just kind of linger on the thought about what is it that it really takes to make an iconic brand. I mean, you've worked with some of the largest brands. You've talked about right from Santur, you've talked about the whole Tata Group, and so on and so forth, the ICICI. You know, just before we start thinking about personal branding, would just love you to kind of think about that. When you look back and said, some brands have really become so much larger than others, right? It's not just about the spend. There's so much more that goes into the brand building, right? Any thoughts on that, Ambi?
So I think to be a very successful long-term brand success, there has to be something to the core of the brand. The brand has to make a promise, and the brand has to understand who is the target customer.
Mm-hmm.
What is the promise I make to that customer? And the brand has to be smart enough to change when the customer is changing.
Right.
Right? If you don't change, you're going to get trapped. You're going to get left behind. I mean, the biggest of brands have been left behind by consumers who suddenly say, "Look,
Not
it
relevant.
doesn't satisfy. It doesn't satisfy me anymore." So, one, a great brand stand for consistency. Great brands also stand for consistent change. So you have to stay consistent to the core, but got to change with the consumer. Look at even Coke. I
Yeah.
mean, Coke is even, Coke had, launched Diet Coke, and then now they've got Coke Zero, right?
Yeah.
So because the consumer is changing, consumer doesn't want a sugared drink,
Yeah.
right? So, okay, I've got Coke Zero for you. It gives you the same taste, but it has got
Mm-hmm.
0 calories. So consistency and change,
Mm.
that has to be at the core of every successful brand. Look at Nike. I mean, Nike is supposed to be very, very, it's still very successful, but some of the nimble, brands which have come out,
Right.
like your On or, Hoka, have,
Yeah.
suddenly started biting pieces of uh, Nike away. Tata Motors stood for value for money vehicle, right?
Right.
And so we built Indica, Tata Indigo, Zest, Manza, all that. And then they got somewhat derailed with Nano. They got excessively focused on Nano.
Yeah.
But to be fair, in after the lockdown, they've come back and
Yeah.
they've produced a whole range of value for money electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at electric, looks like, hey, but this is their genetics. Because this is a company which made very, very economically run diesel vehicles 20 years ago. The
Right.
same DNA. How do you make the total cost of ownership low?
Mm.
It was diesel in the late 90s, early 2000. Now it is electric. So it's the same kind of principle of value for money vehicle. They've also upped the looks quotient, etc., etc. So that's the thing: consistency and change. That's what makes a great brand.
Right. So consistency, change, and being authentic in that sense, right? I mean, always kind of being
Absolutely,
aware of your personal values and you build around that. So I think now
absolutely.
would be a good time to kind of double down, personal branding, and in your mind, how do you really define personal branding? And in which ways do you think it's really similar or dissimilar from what we otherwise call as branding? When you talk about brands and corporates and that.
I think it's very similar to brands, right? Uh, in fact, I think Jeff Bezos has this nice definition. What's a personal brand? Which is, personal brand is what people talk about you when you're not in the room, right? That's
Okay.
what you are, right? So what do people say about you when you're not there? They say he's an arrogant guy, he's a very friendly guy, he's a very analytical guy, he's a creative guy, he's a very tactical guy. He's a guy you can trust. That's your personal brand,
Yeah.
right? Are you aware of it? Are
Mm,
you aware what people are saying behind you?
mm,
Because if you're not, that's where you start. Right? That's where you need to find out what does. Now, I can claim to be very communicative, very articulate. I can claim to be a great author, but if my book sells 5 copies, I'm not a great author, right?
right.
So, uh, what is the positive reconfirmation you're getting from your target audience?
Mm,
If it is your team, what does the team talk about you behind you? What do your superiors talk about you behind you? What does your colleagues talk about you behind you? Right? Are you willing to listen to that? So that is your brand. That is your personal brand.
mhm. And really, when you think about building an authentic personal brand, I mean, there are obviously a lot of misconceptions, and I think you've got this book out. All the world's a stage. I see personal. This whole thing is about balancing it out, right? In some cases, you want people who can be, in some ways, very authentic, at peace with themselves, and at the same time, you're trying, not really looking for external validation, but at the same time, you when you're building a brand, you know that you have to be out there. So how do you balance this out? And maybe you could just kind of double down and share with us some of the steps towards building a personal brand in your mind.
So I think you know uh, you your personal brand is to be built inside out. You have to be something. You can't project something else which you're not. Right.
Mm-hmm,
So I think in the book I've explained, I think, a 5-step process. So the first step is really to say, what do I want to be seen as? Right? What are those 4 or 5 words which describe me, right,
mm-hmm,
as a person? I'm communicative, I'm articulate, whatever, right? And that's the first step.
mm-hmm,
Then you need to validate them. Do people see that,
mm-hmm,
right? Or see somewhat of that, maybe not perfectly, but they see that. Once you confirm that, then you say, look, now how am I going to project? Right? So in a lot of people say, nahi, nahi, I don't want to project anything. I'm a strong and silent type. There is no strong and silent type in this world anymore, right? So there's an interesting grid which my colleague Janikram Murthy at SPJMR and I came out with, which is a 2 by 2 matrix, right? All management gurus talk
yeah.
of 2 by 2 matrix. So 2 by 2 matrix.
Mm,
On one dimension is how competent are you? You're very competent. You're not very competent. On the
mm,
other dimension is how good at personal branding are you? You're very
mm,
good at personal branding. You're not very good at personal branding.
mm,
So if you're not very competent and if you don't do any personal branding, then you will survive under the rock somewhere. No one will notice you, but you'll survive.
mm,
But if you're not competent, but you talk a lot about I am this, I am that, you're going to get discovered.
mm.
Now, so you're going to get discovered. Either you'll get sacked or someone is going to give you a serious dose saying, look, guy, look, Bugger, you don't know anything. You're talking all this nonsense. First, you go back and learn how to make a proper presentation. So you'll learn something, right? So personal branding karke, you'll hopefully become more competent, right?
Mm,
The second is someone who's actually very competent, but does no personal brand. He's very quiet, right? So that guy will get noticed, but he'll get promoted or given increment on a normal Hindu rate of growth. Okay.
right.
The guys who actually come up rapidly in a company are people who are very competent, but are also willing to go that extra mile to build their personal brand. The
Mm,
personal branding could be putting up their hand to say, look, I'd like to do this job, or to volunteer the services, or to say, look, I will I will write this. I'm overloaded, but I don't care. I'll come on Saturday, Sunday, I'll do this. Right? I want to do this. I want to do this. I've done this. Can you see this? I've written something. Can you take a look? Those are the guys who will actually get all the rapid fire increments, the rapid fire promotions, and all that. So even if just being competent in today's world is not enough,
right.
you got to have a healthy dose of personal branding skills. That's what my book talks about, how it helps. Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. But just one question, Ambi. I mean, what do you think has changed in the last 20-25 years? I mean, you've talked about the fact that in today's time, it's not good enough, right? Do you think this was always applicable, or is just getting pronounced a little more? And why do you think it's getting a little pronounced if the answer is yes?
I think it was there always, right? There was always, look at advertising. There were always some people who could build their personal brand very well. I like Padamsee stands out as an outstanding example of
Yeah.
someone who could build himself as a larger than life figure. I mean, Walter Saldana, who ran Chaitra Advertising, was just the opposite. Very competent, but not very good at building his personal brand,
Right.
right? And look at your own old agency HTS, Subhash Ghoshal. Subhash
Yeah.
Ghoshal, extremely competent, not a personal brand like Alec, but he was a personal brand, right?
Yeah.
There was a particular Bengali Bhadralok about him. The way he wrote, the way he presented himself, he's always dressed in a suit, right? I mean, there was some aura around these guys. They
Yeah.
they built that aura, right? They built their personal brand, right? It's not that one day you will see Subhash Ghoshal in a t-shirt and next day you'll see in a kurta, third day you'll see no. You can only visualize Subhash Ghoshal in a suit,
The
right?
consistency that you talked about in the messaging.
Yeah, yeah, like Gerson Dacunia, you
Mm.
always visualize him in a white kurta and a churida, right? You can't visualize him in a t-shirt or a pair of jeans or something, right? There was something even in the way they dressed. There was something to them, so it was always there. What has happened now? It's become accentuated, right? Because I think more competition, right?
Mhm.
More people are aware, and therefore, even at the junior level, people
Mhm.
are conscious of saying, look, what is my boss seeing me as?
Mm.
If I say this, how will it be held against me? Should I dress like this? Should I talk like this? What should I do? Should I put up my hand and offer to make the presentation? Right? How will it affect me? People have become more conscious. And so it's become more important. And of course, the other dimension, which is overblown, is this whole thing about social media. That I have to be present there, I have to post something every other day, etc., which I think is overblown. But that's also there, right? I mean, I think a lot of people. I write columns in various newspapers, but some people read the columns in newspapers. I think some others read it when I post it on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
right? So, are you doing that? Are you doing that bit of being present in various social media platforms? So that
Mm.
also helps.
Right. In fact, you brought up social media, and I think that has really been in many ways a change agent, right, for people because I think Insta, for example, is a way of doing personal brand building for. I'm just trying to say for women, who love to be out there for travel for certain segments, right? LinkedIn has become the go-to place for professional networking, right? Really in the backdrop of all of that, how do you think that social media has changed the things, and what are the very obvious do's and don'ts when you look at it? Because I think nowadays, the moment you talk about personal branding, people just think, oh, that means I need to write two LinkedIn posts a week. I need to tweet 5 times a day or something like that, right? So maybe you could just probably share those thoughts.
I you know I don't know what works, right? But my advice to when I coach
And
senior
I've also
executives.
seen that you've told some of the social media influencers a bit. So in that sense, I mean, so I think just put all of that in a context and would love to,
Yeah, so I don't know what works, right? I mean, even when you take LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is where I am the most active, right? So even
right,
in LinkedIn, I don't know when I post something whether it will get 10,000 impressions or 50,000 impressions, right? I have no clue.
right,
Sometimes it just goes through the roof, it gets 100,000 impressions. Sometimes it tapers off at 5, 6,000 impressions, right? So, but what I tell people, what I tell young executives, what I tell senior managers is, you may not be active on Twitter, you may not be active on Facebook, you may not be active on Insta, but you should be present on LinkedIn. You should
mhm,
make sure your profile is up to date, right?
mm,
Important. Fill it up in the proper way.
mm,
And maybe if you're very busy, spend half an hour a week on LinkedIn. One, check out if you have any messages which you can respond to. You may get a job offer. You may get some other thing, right? You can get that. Uh, like, for example, getting onto this podcast. I mean, Vivek, you
mm.
could have reached out to me. Anupriya would probably have my number. You could have called me, but the request came through LinkedIn, right?
Yep.
One of your team members messaged me. I said, okay, this simply looks interesting. Share some links with me. Let me watch one or two shows. I watched it and I said, okay, yeah, looks interesting. And I discovered you're behind it. And I said, okay, it'll be good to talk to you. And so this particular conversation here has happened because of a LinkedIn conversation with Karishma, right?
Yeah.
So So LinkedIn can open many doors for you. So spend at least half an hour on LinkedIn. And if you are on Insta, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, if you're a young executive, make sure it is clean. Make sure your profile is clean, because all HR teams today are scraping your page to find out whether there's anything which you've said which is wrong, right? So you're going to get into some trouble if you do something wrong there. So make sure it's clean. After that, it's up to you. You can post once a week, you can post twice a week. Only problem is, my little advice is, when you post something on there is no point sharing something unless you have a point of view, right? If, for example, I read an article by Vivek, which is interesting, and I share it on LinkedIn, I should say a few things. I read this article. I agree with what he has said on these points, but I don't agree on these points. Please read the article and let me know what you think, right? So you've given a context. So what I think is stupid is you read something and you share it without giving a context, which is really stupid. The other thing is, yeah, honestly, a lot of stuff on Twitter is toxic, but there's also a lot of good stuff on Twitter.
Absolutely.
It depends on whom you follow. Same thing with LinkedIn. There's a lot of good stuff on LinkedIn. You learn a lot by following the right people, reading the right articles. And I get people, students telling me, I've read this article of yours. I follow you on LinkedIn. I think it's very happy. I'm very happy that, that people are finding whatever I write of use to them. And that's the whole purpose, right, of sharing it on LinkedIn, is that you be of some help to someone somewhere, right? So sometimes, entrepreneurs contact me saying, I read this, can we talk? I have this problem. Yeah, please feel free, call, let's talk, right? So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Insta, these are one continuum. Probably at one end is LinkedIn, the other end is Insta, right? So you have to figure out where you want to play. So I remember talking to Prakash Iyer. I said, how do you manage it? He said, boss, I'm optimized it for LinkedIn, right? After that, I post the same thing everywhere. So I can't go around changing it for changing it for Facebook, and changing it for Twitter, and changing it for Insta. I can't do that. I don't have the time. So my target audience is LinkedIn. I prepare that, and then I share the same thing everywhere. If people see it, fine. People don't see it, fine. No problem. So you have to have a strategy, right? And it's your strategy. You have to decide what your strategy.
Right.
Sorry.
Another interesting thought really is that if you look at it, if you're an independent professional, if you're a consultant, you can obviously choose whichever persona that you have, which is probably being genuine. But when you're working for an organization, sometimes it does happen that your authentic self or your brand personality is very different from, let's say, the brand itself or the organization that you're working for. I mean, you could be a very flamboyant guy, but working for one of the big four, where you need to be, under the radar, right? And vice versa, right? How do you any interesting insights into that?
So I think it's a good question. I think, if you're working in an organization, the organization is paying your salary, right? So you cannot say anything against the organization. So your brand has to be subservient to the organization brand. Like, as long as I was working in FCB Ulka, right? All my presentations, where when I talk about a client, I only talk positive things about my client. Right? Because I can't criticize something Tata has done. No, how can I? Because they pay my salary in a way, right? So I will always be positive, right? Today I'm independent. I can have an opinion. I can criticize FCB's advertising. I can criticize Interface Advertising. I can criticize Tata. I can criticize whomever I want. I may still not do it, but technically I can. But if you're working in a particular company, if you have a somewhat different brand persona, which is not in line with the company's ethos, then you got to either get it cleared by your company that they allow you to, for example, let's say you're a LGBTQ activist. So you got to get it cleared with the company that, the company is okay with you being activist, right? And a lot of companies may say, yes, you can. Some companies say, no, you can't, because we don't want to get into public eye because of this. We are sorry. Right? Many companies say, yeah, go ahead. You're a feminist. You want to write something, somewhat incendiary about women treatment, go ahead. But please mention it is your personal opinion, that it is not a reflection of my company's point of view. So you get it cleared by Copcom, get it cleared by compliance, and then go ahead, right? And if you believe in something very strongly, and your company is not allowing you to do that, then quit that company. Right? Don't work there. Right? Look for another job. Easy to say, but
Yeah. An interesting episode happened around, I think, a year and a half back. I think there was a software engineer called Blake Lemon from Google who actually made the claim on social media that the LLM that he's working with has gone sentient, and obviously that was not in line with what Google's stated policy was, led to a big flare up, and eventually it ended up, with him parting ways. He was asked to leave, right? So I think this whole point about being very, very cognizant about the company that you're working for and being subservient is very important, right? I think it doesn't mean that just because you can tweet, you can just tweet whatever you want. You have to kind of
yeah, exactly. So there was I don't want to name the company, but in particular case, this company has a big relationship with a uh, big FMCG company, right?
Mhm.
And someone in the company had tweeted something very negative about the product being made by the FMCG company, right? Now, uh, fortunately, it came in the press, and I could figure out who it was, etc., etc. But the real name was not revealed. The tweet was taken down. Then I questioned the company, saying, "Look, do you have a social media policy?" Right. So this is about 12, 13 years ago. So the question I was asked is, "What is a social media policy?" So I said, "No, there is something called a social media policy. Please check with CII and FICCI." They didn't have. CII did not have a standard social media policy which it can share with its members. So then, being an IPG, I got what IPG has a social media policy. I said, "Look, please have this, share it with all your employees. That you're welcome to tweet, but this is a policy. You cannot criticize something the company has done. You cannot criticize any of our customers' products. You cannot criticize all this. Right? This is our policy. If you're not agreeable to this, you're welcome to leave the company." Right? So a lot of companies are not clear about it.
Right, right.
And you selectively hammer a guy, which is also not fair.
Absolutely. I think it's more on the HR right now to kind of have a very well stated policy rather than leaving ambiguity, right? There are a lot of questions popping up on the chat, Ambi, so I'm just going to take a few of them. So there's Lakshmi is asking, how can someone successfully build a personal brand without having a large following on social media? It seems, in some ways people say that you have to get noticed first, have a following, then you can kind of build it out. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think building a personal brand and having following in social media are two independent things, right? You
You
can
think
be
so?
a strong you can be a strong independent. There are a lot of people who are very strong personal brands who don't have a social media following, right? I can be a very competent guy. I can be a very, very respected, manager, but I may not be active on social media, which is fine, right? I don't think. Look at even among professional managers. Look at Mr. Ramadurai. I don't think he's very active on social,
Absolutely.
right? But he's Padma Bhushan, right?
Yeah.
So you can be a highly respected leader without being excessively active on social media. So equating strong personal brand to number of followers on social media is, I think, a wrong metric.
Right. And there's an interesting, I think I would say a follow-up question from Advait. He's saying, Ambi sir, I wanted to know, when do you think it's time to expand or scale your personal brand beyond the social media? In fact, I think this would be a nice time to kind of talk about it, that, because personal brand is not equal to social media presence. It's other things you talked about. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is the problem. That's the reason I wrote that book, right? Very often personal branding is equated to social media. It is not. I can be a strong personal brand without being active on social media at all, right? I can be a personal brand because personal brands, let's talk of when there was no social media. Right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk of 25 years ago, right? We talked of
I've lost you. Yeah, you're back.
We talked of Alec Padamsee, right? We talked
Absolutely.
of Subhash Ghoshal. They were strong personal brands, but there was no social media then. right? So how do you become social? How do you become strong personal brand?
Mm.
You can write in newspapers, in magazines, columns. You can write. You can go and give talks in schools, in business schools, in colleges, and you become a personal brand, right? Even within your own company, if you're seen as a go-to person for something, you become a personal brand, right?
Right.
This guy is great. He can put together a presentation in 2 days. You're the guy to go to. You become a strong personal brand,
Right.
right? So you don't equate personal brand with social media,
Mm.
uh, and that's over. I mean, it's overhyped.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be. What I said is that you have to be present in social media because you need to know what people are talking, but you don't need to post every 2 days, every 3 days, every 4 days, right?
Mm.
You can build a strong personal brand without worrying too much about social media. But what we said is right. You have to define who is your brand. What is your brand? Am I
Right.
consistent to my brand value? And am I changing at regular intervals into what my target consumer is wanting?
Right. I think the starting point of your book, All the World's a Stage, which is I'm sure is inspired from your coaching experience, is really about trying to understanding yourself first, who you are, what are your values, what are your things that you would like to project, and that becomes the starting point to understand that. So I think a lot of the time, we just kind of going through the motions without really understanding the product itself, which is us.
Yeah, exactly. So, in the book I've presented, the book is a story. It's about four people meeting for their silver reunion in their business school. It's little fiction. It's not real, but one of them is actually a very successful businessman who's taken his company public, but he doesn't believe in personal branding.
Mm.
So the whole story is about how people tell him, look, you are already a personal brand, whether you like it or not.
Mm.
And then you can do this much more to become even better, and how that
Right.
is needed. How you dress, how you talk, how you behave, right? How you entertain, right? I mean, there is a little anecdote I've written about in the book, which is something which I used to practice, and I put it in the words of someone else there. If you want to impress a new prospective client and you want to take them out for dinner to a five-star hotel,
Mhm.
do you go to any hotel? Or do you have a favorite restaurant in a hotel where they recognize you?
Mm.
So you walk in, the moment you walk in, the restaurant manager looks at you and says,
Mm.
Mr. Saxena, welcome back, sir. Yes, we
Mm.
have your favorite table for you.
Yeah.
So your client who's walking with you is already impressed. He's saying, yeah, Oberoi Hotel mein, Vivek seems to know everyone.
Mm.
The restaurant manager is addressing by name, saying, "Sir, please come." How was Vivek managed to do that? Because Vivek manages to go to that restaurant probably every month.
Yeah.
He chats up with the restaurant manager, and the restaurant manager knows his name. And
Mm.
therefore, when he walks in with a new person,
Mm.
he's acknowledged, right? That's your personal brand.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say you're gaming the system, but that build, that communicates something to your prospect, which,
Yeah.
saying I'm a big man doesn't communicate.
Yeah. That was a BTL tip for personal branding below the line.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Ami, there's a interesting question here, and I would like you to expand on that. He said Chirag is asking which brand you think does an exceptional job of connecting with its audience today and why. And I would like you to add, which person do you think has done an exceptional job of building a personal brand? So, a regular brand and a personal brand.
Okay, so a regular brand, there are many brands which have done a great job of connecting with their people. And among the new age brands, I think among the older brands, I would say a brand like Amul and a brand like Tata does an outstanding job.
Right.
Amul is, in your face regularly communicating very interesting stuff which only they can do. And to the listeners here who may not be aware, in fact, Amul's ad agency, Dakuna, doesn't even get the client to clear the line. The little thing which you see every other day as what they call Amul topicals are released by the agency without
Wow.
even getting a client to clear it. The client sees it in the newspaper the next day. So Amul is amazing. Amul is amazing. Among the people, among executives who have built very good, very strong, very consistent personal brands. Some of the people whom I can think of is someone like Harish Bhatt from Tata, who's amazing. I mean, he's so active on social media. He's so active, so prolific in his writing, and he's built an amazing personal brand of consistency, humility, communicativeness, and I think I'm full of admiration for someone like uh, Harish Bhatt, who's done a fabulous job in doing this. And of course, there are others. I'm just picking one to just to name a person.
No, no, I think Amul especially is, it's amazing how timeless a brand, and it's managed to stay relevant. It doesn't feel somehow outdated, right? In that sense.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, going back, Anupriya, your sister will know about it. When they were launching ice cream,
Yeah.
people thought, who will buy Amul ice cream? Because Amul is seen as milk, milk and butter. The ice cream will taste very buttery. Who's going to buy it? But they managed to crack the market and they became the number one ice cream brand in the country. Yeah.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Something else now. Like, I mean, things do sometimes go wrong, and your personal brand does take a hit. And any thoughts, or maybe any anecdotes or public anecdotes that we have seen where you've seen somebody being able to really come back from that and salvage the issue. In fact, in one of the talks I was having with somebody, uh, he mentioned that it's probably easy for brands to recover. Because you could probably, let's say that we have a new management, you can say we fired the person. We've seen public examples of Maggie and Cadbury's in recent times being able to walk back, and actually being welcomed with open arms, right? But sometimes these things can be a little more fatal, I think, for an individual, right? So, any thoughts about that?
I think people have done that and people have gone through a bit of a problem, but and the way they handle it, and I don't want to name names, but
Sure.
what they do is they go under the radar for a period,
Hmm.
right? Maybe they go under the radar for a year or two, and then
Hmm.
they come back very quietly, right? And people are willing to forgive. So public memory is really short, right?
Yeah.
So I know that if it's a big problem like a Me Too problem,
Mm.
then it's difficult to come back. But if
Yeah.
it is where through association someone did something and you are seen in the same room with that person, then you can probably lie low for some time and then come back quietly,
Mm.
right? But if it is a little more messy, then it's difficult to come out of it. But it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge.
So, I mean, you would still prefer just kind of low under the radar rather than acknowledging and or apologizing, or probably it depends on the circumstances, right? I would
Yeah,
say.
I know. Apologizing is a must do, right? I mean, you got to say sorry,
Right.
and then you go quiet after that. You don't need to keep saying sorry, sorry, sorry every 2 days, right? Say sorry, and then you go quiet,
Mhm.
right? And then come back maybe after a year or two
Mhm.
with a new version of yourself.
Right.
Everyone has done. I mean, a lot of people have done that. I mean, and quietly come back. Don't come
Right.
back with a bang. Then you'll again get hammered. So,
Right.
yeah.
Sakshi is asking out here that, when should one seek professional help, like a branding consultant or a brand consultant, while building the personal brand? Or is this something that they should try and venture out on their own? I mean, how important is it, do you think, to kind of look at that?
So people have asked me, can you suggest someone who's good at personal branding? I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe internationally there are people who can mentor you, but if you get a good coach, good executive coach, the executive coach should be able to help you with your personal brand. At least give you some basic things on your communication skills, your executive. See, the underpinning of a personal brand is your executive presence and your executive, what is called a communication, right?
Mm.
Your voice. So
Mm.
executive voice and executive presence are the two
Right.
foundations of your personal brand. So a good executive coach can help you at least unpack these two. And I remember once, working with someone, And I asked him, I saw the bag he was carrying. I said, let's call him Ravi. Ravi, you're a senior manager, yeah. Look at the bag you're carrying. And he said, sir, isme kya burai hai? I said, yeah, you're a senior manager. You can't be carrying, look at yourself. You got to look like a senior manager.
Right.
So then the next visit I went, he was said, sir, do you see my shirt?
Hmm.
I said, huh? Do you see my specs? Huh? See my bag? Yeah, correct. Yeah, कर दिया. हाँ, sir, आपने बताया, मैंने कर दिया.
Right. 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 So,
So it's simple stuff like that.
just shifting gears a bit now. I mean, there's just so much happening in the world right now, especially. I think the changes that are happening through digital transformation, social media, of course, has gone next level, and now you have this whole thing with AI and avatars and everything out there, right? Any thoughts that you have about personal branding in a world which is going to be so much more? You probably have versions of you. You probably have, maybe versions of you greeting people online on your chat, at some point, so any thoughts about what's really going to happen in this space?
I don't know fully what's going to happen,
Yeah,
but I think for one thing is that if you don't know how to use social media, how to use AI, how to
yeah.
use LLM, you're going to be left behind, right? So you got to know. You got to know. Uh, for example, I was fooling around with ChatGPT, and I said, look, go through my profile and suggest 10 topics on which I should write uh, based on what I've written in the past. I got some pretty good suggestions.
Yeah.
Right? So these are things which are freely available to you. I was at a forum, and I think one of the big four were saying how they were using AI. So they said we had put out a white paper on some topic, let's say maybe infrastructure growth in India. And they said we have 200 people working in our company,
Hmm.
okay, in the infrastructure side of the business. So this 200-page report, we gave it to a large language model, and we told that large language model to create 200 800-word articles
Hmm.
from this for each of them to share on their respective email network.
Wow.
Each will be different. Each will
Mm.
be different. Each will look at one point. And they said we got fantastic stuff.
Mm.
Like these are the ways in which we can constructively use ChatGPT and OpenAI and large language models. If you don't use it, we are being completely foolish, right? If you overuse it, you're going to get laughed at. So you got to find the right balance.
Right. And what do you think is really going to be the impact of all of these transformation when you look at mainstream advertising right now? I mean, we saw this big jump that happened in productivity when we moved towards those Macs, from, and, especially for the client servicing people when they had to move from those, we used to call them what, acetates to
Mm.
PowerPoint, So I'm just saying, what do you think is going to happen in the world of the
Yeah.
communication?
So, this is, you're talking to me, right? When I started my career in advertising in 1979, presentations were made on chart paper,
Oh, yeah.
right? So I used to sit and draw those lines and write on chart paper, right? My
Okay.
old presentations to, Thermax and Godfrey Phillips and Cadbury's used to be on chart paper,
So for you,
right?
acetates would have been a jump.
Yeah. So from chart paper, it became acetate, right? Acetate was again handwritten acetate, and then we could photocopy on acetate. Then
Right.
from acetate, we went to carousel projector,
Correct.
Kodak
Yeah,
projector,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, that's
Then we
right.
went to PowerPoint,
Yeah.
right? Now we are in a situation that we can pick a document, give
Mm.
it to Copilot, and say, give me a presentation of 20 slides,
Yeah.
and you get a presentation,
Yeah.
right? So the point is, the presentation will be good, may not be great. That's where
Yeah.
you come in. So one of the worries which I have is that in the past, the youngsters in the company coming in freshly from these schools
Mm.
used to do the grunge work. They used to
Yeah.
go through the research. They used to write the first version of the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. And that comes to the bosses like you and me. And we say, no, this is not okay. This is not okay. This is not okay. They go back, write it again. They bring it back as V1, V2, V3, V4, V45, V75, right? And they learn. Now, what is going to happen? We are going to do that with an OpenAI tool.
Yeah.
We're going to tell the AI to make a presentation, give it to us,
Mm.
and then you're going to say, no, this is not good enough. Can you improve the language? Can you add some more information about consumers?
Mhm.
And unlike a management trainee who will sulk, uh, your Gen AI tool happily works, right? You
Yeah.
don't even need to say thanks,
Yeah.
right? And you can keep rejecting, and it'll keep working, right?
Yeah.
So the role of entry level interns is going to dramatically change. So
Yeah.
they'll be one expected to do the grunge work, but also use OpenAI tools for doing the grunge work and doing them better.
Yeah.
So that's what is going to separate the smart kids from the not so smart kids. It's not that they can program AI, no, but how can they use AI? So if you don't know how to use AI, it is be like you don't know how to use PowerPoint or Excel or Word, right?
Right.
So it'll be like that in the next maybe 3-4 years.
So, what would be your advice whenever, somebody who's getting into the workforce now, especially in the field of communications, advertising, marketing, what is the single advice to leaders as to what is the skill that they should be focusing on? Especially now that a lot of these tools are available, and honestly, we don't even know which with the how the job displacement will eventually fall out, right? We don't even know which jobs are going to remain, which jobs won't remain. So what is, and I'm sure because of your assignments that you do with the SPJN, right? I mean, that must be a very important question, and that that you must be having discussion with your students.
Yeah, I think one thing is there's an old statement, yeah, that more things change,
The more
more
they
they are the same. Okay, more thing. What is our primary job in marketing is to understand consumers and to satisfy consumers. And what Peter Drucker said, the only job of an organization is to create and keep a customer. So you have to be focused on that. What will help you get a customer? What will help you keep a customer?
right.
All these are shiny toys. Acetate, PowerPoint, Excel, AI, all of them are shiny toys, right?
Right.
AI, tomorrow something else will come. So
Mm.
your core job you cannot forget. Who is my consumer? Do I know the consumer well? What is the problem which the consumer is having, which my brand is solving, right? If you're focused on that, then all these you can use to do the job better. Instead, you say, no, I want to use AI. Arey, yaar, first of all, find out what is your consumer, what is your consumer's problem,
Mm.
right? You can say, look, I'm going to use AI to find my consumer's problem. Okay, that's fine.
Mm.
I'm going to use AI. I'm going to scrape 5,000 reviews from Amazon and I'm going to give it to AI to analyze it. Great, do that, right?
Mm.
Instead of going and asking AI, what is my consumer's problem with the brand? It's not going to solve the problem, right? So understand you're going to have this Swiss knife set of tools, right? You got to use the right tool for the right thing. So, and sometimes Gen AI tools don't catch everything. They miss a lot of stuff. And,
That's
and that's going to separate the good guys from the bad guys.
I mean, if you haven't already written something, you should author an essay at least saying what won't change in a world of AI. Like, I think that'd be a great.
So it's a big topic, yeah, big
Yeah.
topic. I'm a cog in the wheel, yeah. But
No, but I think
it's
that make for very interesting reading, and I think it'd be fascinating. Uh, I think Ambi, it's been close to an hour. I think before we kind of bring this to a close, would love to just fire some rapid questions that's been put together by the team. Would love to just kind of see your your thoughts on that.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so here I go. One word that describes your life philosophy.
Keep learning.
Hmm. I can understand that. Yeah. One skill you believe everyone should develop.
Resilience and agility.
Hmm. And if you can have dinner with any fictional character, who would that person be?
Swami from R.K. Narayan.
Okay. If you could switch lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Dean, Harvard Business School. And
Okay.
on that one day, I'll make all the content from Harvard Publishing free.
In fact, MIT and all, even Harvard, they are in the process of doing a lot of that. And
They have to do it. I mean, what are they doing with? They've got so much money. Why do they put anything behind a paywall?
seriously,
That way I admire McKinsey. At one time, McKinsey Quarterly
yeah,
used to be a glossy magazine which I used to get, because some friends of mine in McKinsey, and I used to keep it. But one fine day they said, "Yeah, what are we doing?" And they put everything on the net. It's all available, free.
right, right,
So why
right.
can't Harvard do that?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, Stanford has done a lot of that, to their
Yeah,
credit. Yeah.
yeah.
If you went in your current profession, which is very difficult to imagine, what would you be doing?
Film production.
Sorry?
Film production.
Film production. I mean, all advertising people want to land up there, right? Ivan Atha was the national creative director. And in his common line to all the frustrated, creative guys, like, okay, but Ivan, this is not sexy enough. And he says, listen, if you want something sexy and creative, join the films. We are building brands out here. Favorite brand in the world right now?
It's a toss-up between Tata and Amul. Old loyalty.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice. And I think there's a case for both of them, really. Yeah. And the most impactful book that you've ever read, on branding, and any book outside of that also?
No, I mean, branding books by both David Acker and Kevin Lane Keller, both write outstanding books on branding.
Right.
And any book you want to say, it is Discovery of India by Jawaharlal Nehru.
Right.
Very impactful, yeah. And I think great book.
Great, Ambi. I mean, this was a fantastic. I mean, the hour just flew by. Didn't even realize it. But thank you so much for your time. I mean, really enjoyed this conversation on advertising, the good old days of advertising, personal branding, and the future, really in the world of AI, and how things will probably remain the same. But would love your thoughts. Any closing thoughts for the listeners on the podcast now, or who are listening?
So the last thought is, which is the most enduring personal brand to come out of India ever? Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And in the book, I've talked about how Mahatma Gandhi built his personal brand by using several tools we talked about in this show.
Right.
Like how you dress, how you talk, how you communicate, etc., 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 and how you have to be true to the core. The core of Mahatma Gandhi was truth. He stood for truth, and that's why his book is also autobiography, Experiment with Truth, right? So I leave that thought. Go read Mahatma Gandhi's works and have a great year ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for coming here. Would love to catch up with you, hopefully sometime in Jan. And in the meantime, season's greetings, and wish you a very happy New Year in advance.
Thank you, Vivek. Look forward to seeing you in the other side of the year, right? See you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you.